Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Too much money chasing too few goods. That's the story of our inflationary reality at this point. Well, we know that too much money is profligate monetary and fiscal policy. We know that too few goods is breaking the supply chains. That's what the lockdowners did. We know that ports in L.A. and Long Beach are backed up. And it's worse than that. Even when goods do get offloaded and put onto rail cars, you've got modern-day Jesse Jameses hitting these rail cars in L.A.
Taking whatever they want. And it looks like a third world country. So much garbage. It's sick.
The Union Pacific officials have been openly complaining about the lack of law enforcement response to what's happening to these trains as they're being robbed, the rail cars being, and all the goods contained in them being stolen. It was enough such that Governor Gavin Newsom descended down from the French Laundry to survey the sites, and here's what he said.
I see what you see. I see what you've been covering. I see what everybody's seen, and asking myself, what the hell is going on? I mean, look like a third world country, these images, the drone images that were on the nightly news day in and day out. Some networks weaponizing them for their own, political agenda, and others just reporting the damn news. This is not one-off. This is organized theft. They're organized groups of folks that move from site to site. When there's more attention, a bright light on one site, they move to the next site.
Well, then do something about it. I mean,
what the hell's going on?
Yeah.
You tell us, Gavin.
And he's
what
out
the
there
hell is
picking
going
up garbage.
What the hell is going on? Why don't you ask George Gascon, the DA in L.A., about his philosophy when it comes to prosecuting retail theft, prosecuting B&Es, breaking up these thievery rings. I mean, it's the same story over and over. What the hell's going on? What the hell's going on in New York City, where an officer was gunned down over the weekend and another officer is fighting for his life, both shot by what I understand is somebody with a long criminal record. What the hell's going on in Detroit, mentioned earlier in the show, a man who, again, a long criminal record, accused of setting his girlfriend on fire, 6.5 months pregnant with twins, burning 60% of her body, $50,000 bond. He posts $5,000 and he disappears. Law enforcement now looking for him. What's going on in Chicago, where last year we had 6 individuals who were on electronic monitoring for a violent crime, either accused of murder or attempted murder, commit another violent crime while awaiting trial on the violent crime for which they were arrested.
And as we speak this morning, 2,300 violent criminals are on electronic monitoring in Chicago.
What the hell's going on? We know what the hell is going on. The question is, what the hell is anybody in big blue city America going to do about it? For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Doug Collins, former congressman from Georgia's 9th, author of The Clock and the Calendar, a front row look at the Democrats' obsession with Donald Trump, and host of the Doug Collins podcast on the Salem Podcast Network. You can find his podcast at DougCollinsPodcast.com. Doug, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, good morning. I have a question for you. Does Gavin Newsom remind you of the guy who woke up after a 3-day binge and wakes up and wonders why his head hurts?
Right.
He looks like he did, too.
Yeah. Of course, what we know is that this moral indignation is all performative. We know what's going on, but we're unwilling to change the protocol. We're unwilling to pressure decarceration and non-prosecution prosecutors because they're our political allies. Isn't that right?
That is right. And this is my problem, though. And one of the areas you just mentioned was that the area of the trains that are being broken into. My question is not only we know that the L.A. prosecutorial, DA down there in the situation in California, but my question is, where's Merrick Garland? This has to do with interstate commerce. This has to do with interstate transmission of goods. Where is the Department of Justice who the FBI, the full force of the federal government in this as well. It shows a lack of concern, frankly, from the very top on down. So it's not surprising that you see these things happening. And it's not about the police, they need to be able to do their job, and you need to make sure that those who have violent criminals, those who are disrupting our neighborhoods, need to be taken off the street and not put back on.
So how can conservatives lead the way to cash bail reform?
The biggest way is, number one, is we got to hold, and this is going to be a longer process. Too many times conservatives have let lower level elections be, just go unnoticed. That's how we've gotten DAs in some of these cities and in other places where they're never challenged about what they actually believe as far as a criminal justice procedure. But then we also have to put into real reforms in our legislatures as well, is what is actually qualifying to for bail or not. In many of the cases you just talked about and had on the show, these folks should have never been on a pretrial release. They should have never been there because of what they have done. And to have that many people out there, they know they're not getting monitored. This is where conservatives have to step up and say real criminal justice reform punishes those who need to be punished, holds accountable those who need to be held accountable, and then looks for ways to take those that we don't need to flood our system with and make sure we hold them accountable in different ways.
I like what I think you were just intimating. I want to develop that a bit more, which is rather than just a federal law enforcement response, federalizing law enforcement, which troubles me, a federal political response from the Republican Party to play in these big cities and make law and order a front and center election issue. Run credible candidates, support credible candidates for mayor of L.A., New York, Chicago, and the like.
Exactly. I mean, and look, in some of these cities, we understand you may not get, from a conservative perspective, a full-blown conservative, but at least if you put pressure on the Democratic Party or you put pressure on the political establishment in these towns to say, look, you're affecting our very public safety, and you're seeing it happen across the country. These are then, highlight, as Gavin Newsom was so upset about, no, you're going to highlight the stupid in these cities that are actually, hurting people's lives. But it doesn't have to be, a lock them up mentality with no concern, because that's almost as bad as the other way, because we end up with a system that is clogged up and inefficient. What you've got to do is you've got to say public safety number one, and then how do we help those who are in the system? This is where conservative compassion actually and conservative accountability comes in. Instead of just continually incarcerating mental health people who have mental health illness or drug addiction, how are we actually helping them break those cycles so we're not putting them in jail all the time?
Yeah, and just on the federal law enforcement, because of course, especially now with Biden in the White House, you hear blue city and state mayors and governors talking about, working with the federal government and having the federal government come in. Now all of a sudden they're interested in the federal government. But even still, the federal law enforcement has a role to play, I'll grant you. But there's an interesting project that's being done by the Heritage Foundation and the Mercatus Center at George Mason University, where they're looking at the increase in the number of criminal sections in the federal criminal code, and they find there are about 36% more criminal sections in 2019 than there were 25 years earlier. And I don't think that conservatives should allow the left to try to outsource law enforcement to the federal government. Conservatives need to hold state and local officials accountable for what they're doing at the state and local level. They have the tools to enforce the law and maintain the peace if they want to do that. And it's important that conservatives make it clear to their residential populations, this is on your leadership and the choices you're making at the state and local level.
You're exactly right. I fought this for years in Congress. I mean, we put the problem in America right now is not that we don't have enough laws. I mean, frankly, that's the last problem we have is enough laws. Now, I'm amazed in the state and local level, enforcement is where you actually have it. And so for liberals who, again, leave the federal out of it. I mean, FBI is stretched on many things anyway. But when it comes back to state and local, you've got the laws on the books that can put all of these people in jail or hold them accountable. But then again, you have to also understand that new laws play better. It's a political sound. Well, I'm going to introduce a law that strengthens X. I'm going to do a law that does this. And you have mayors like your own Mayor Lightfoot there who simply talk about gun control and everything else, and yet the very issue is that everything she talks about is already illegal.
Right.
It's already illegal. You don't need more laws. You need enforcement. So it's the antithesis of the defund the police. It's the antithesis of drawing back our law enforcement community, because they're the ones that have to enforce the laws that are on the books, and we have enough laws.
Since we got you, and you're from Georgia, and you were a congressman, and you ran for Senate as well, give us your handle on the Senate race against Warnock, which is a key seat for Republicans to pick up, as well as the governor's race, where you have former Senator Perdue challenging Brian Kemp in that Republican primary. How optimistic are you about good outcomes for Republicans in those two important races this cycle?
I'm very optimistic about it. I think in the Senate race, of course, you have Herschel Walker, former football player from down here. You have Gary Black, who's the agricultural commissioner. Both good candidates. It's going to be an interesting primary process, but whoever comes out of that will be together. And going against Warnock, who has shown himself to be completely out of touch with Georgia. And then on the governor's side, you've got a primary on a very base disliked governor in Governor Kemp. It's rare that you find an incumbent governor with a lot of resources and money open up behind in a primary, and that's where Kemp finds himself. Translating that into the general election, it's going to be Republicans in Georgia are going to have to show up and vote. They're going to have to get out, and if that happens, then I feel very optimistic about it.
All right. He is Doug Collins, former congressman from Georgia's 9th, author of The Clock and the Calendar, a front row look at the Democrats' obsession with Donald Trump, and host of the Doug Collins podcast on the Salem Podcast Network. Find his podcast at DougCollinsPodcast.com, DougCollinsPodcast.com. Doug Collins, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Great time. Y'all stay warm up there.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's what Chicago is talking about. It's Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy on AM 560. The Answer.
The Lou Dobbs Financial Report is brought to you by Signature Bank, helping local businesses succeed. Visit signaturebank.bank for your commercial banking needs.
I'm Keith Peters in for Lou Dobbs. 8,000 workers back on the job at 80 Kroger-owned stores in Denver. Toyota cuts back on production. Those stories next.
Here's some great news.